Hello and welcome back. This is Sherry with Heart and Soulful. I am back in the studio. I decided to turn the camera on because I'm working on my slow stitch project and I came up with something fun and I wanted to kind of show you where I'm at after the last video. So for those of you just joining me for the very first time, welcome. I haven't said that in the last couple of videos. Sorry for the shadows. It's dark in here again and I tried adding another light. So I'm hoping that you can see a little bit better. And I am working on, if you're just joining me, like I said, some French journals that I have made using my digital kits and some other things. And I'm working on some slow stitch spine covers. I still have the insides of a couple of them to do, but I'm working on some simultaneously. So I had two more small journals that I wanted to do the slow stitch spine covers using one of my digitals that I just tore into pieces. So I hope you enjoy this video. If you do, please give me a thumbs up and click on subscribe if you haven't already. I do have a playlist down in the description for this whole series. This will be episode 13. So if you want to watch from the beginning, if you've missed any part of it, go ahead and watch from the beginning and binge watch. And I'm hopefully kind of continuing to work on these till I get them finished now. Hopefully, if I don't have to take another long break here. So what I wanted to show you was where I left off in the last one. So this is the smaller of the two, and I have kind of zoomed in here so that you can see. In the last episode, I cut the leaves. I wanted this rose to be my focal point and kind of done an applique, even though the digital itself has sort of a fabric and embroidered rose. I wanted to do it different than I did the previous one, which was to stitch all this and cut out a round part of it so that you saw it just against the cover. And then I did a lot of stitching and beading in here. So I decided this one I want to do a little bit different just to show you another way to do the same flower. And so I'm doing this one with more applique. And then I'm also going to, add some embroidery on top of it when I get to that point. But I wanted to show you where I'm at. I went ahead and stitched some satin stitch in a couple of different green colors for this bottom part of the rose. Got my leaves stitched on. The color of green that I had was not as much contrast as I want, but I'm still gonna do that maybe where I put some couching in here after the fact. That's a different color that will show up more, and then maybe some veining on the leaves that will show up a little bit more. So that I'll do later. The next step I'm going to do on this one, I'm not going to do it on camera, I don't think, because I have to dig out some fabrics, but I'm going to do the same sort of applique thing, I think, on parts, if not all, of the pieces of this rose. So that'll take me a little bit to figure out, but that's where I'm heading with that one. I did want to go ahead and sew my patches on that I had pinned down before. I did this on camera where I just used kind of a light rose color and did some cantha stitch on this piece that I had printed on. And then you saw me stamp some fabric with just some French inspired stamps and place those. So when I went to stitch these on, I had the little crown. And I decided I really wanted the crown to be jeweled and all of that. So I used some, if I can get in here super close, I used some seed beads, just some clear ones, and I put those on first. I actually did this part before I stitched around the edge because I wanted the crown to stand out the most, and I wasn't sure what color I would want to do or what stitch I would want to do for around the edge. So I did the little seed beads first, and then I just kept adding to it. I had a thread. You can see it's kind of, I don't know if you can tell, this thread has a little bit of a sheen to it. And many videos ago, I showed other ways to find threads, not just using DMC embroidery floss or, different types of embroidery floss. I actually took apart some upholstery trim, some cording that had maybe multiple colors on it in different sheens of threads. And I actually took some of those apart and I ended up with some really pretty threads. So you can see it has a little bit of a sheen to it. So I used this one for the crown. And then I also used some of this gold, and I think this is DMC E677, which is a metallic. I really hate working with these. I find them difficult. They're fine for little bits, little small things, but the threads split a lot. And so they're kind of harder to work with. But I did use some of that. So those were the threads that I used for the crown. And let me get this back up here. So for the stitching, after I had the little seed beads on, I used a fly stitch, and I'll show you a picture of that in a book. But I just decided I wanted those little scallop kind of look on the crown, which worked out perfectly. And then I used that little bit of metallic just to do some a running stitch, if you can see right below that. And then these are little colonial knots in the same metallic, just for a more jeweled look again. And then I went ahead and on top of the crown I added a little, I can't remember, I think it's a colonial knot too, a little colonial knot on top of, above each of the little seed beads, just to make her crown a little taller. And then I took the same kind of sagey color, which is DMC 647, and that I used for the cantha stitch on this wallpaper background. And I just used that and just did a little simple little straight stitches all around the edge. So that way it's stitched down really well. I like how it looked. You see that she's wearing a crown now, but it still looks like a patch. So I really like that. And then I took the postage stamp one. And a lot of times for me, when I'm trying to figure out what color, as you saw in the previous slow stitch piece I did, if you watched those episodes, I sort of looked inside the book and grabbed a bunch of different colors that I found inside and decided to use those on my spine cover. I cleaned up my pad after I did that, but I still had some little bits of that I didn't put back on their little spools. And so a lot of times I'll just I'll look to see if I have anything in my mess that I left. Maybe it's just a small piece or of a single strand or something. I'll see if I have anything like that, and that's what I'll choose to use for my next thread. So I don't always, have a whole lot of thought behind it. This one I grabbed was kind of, I'm not sure if it's the same as this, might be a little different thread here. And I don't know which one it is because it's one that I just had a scrap on my table, but it's kind of a peachy pink color. Reminded me of what's here in the dress. And I did, because it was a postage stamp, I did a fly stitch, but more in a triangular kind of tight way, where this one I did more loose, so it was like a U shape. I like to do that to use maybe the same stitch in different places and vary it up a little bit. So if you are new to slow stitching or have not embroidered in a long time and you can't remember different stitches, for me it's fun if you have a sampler. When I did the Roxy's Journal of Stitchery, this was the journal that I did, and it was, I think they've done 3 or on their 3rd one after this. But one of the things that we did was we did a sampler. So I have, on my sampler, I didn't put the names of the stitches, but I did in the back, I did kind of a little glossary at the end. So this was kind of my first attempt at doing these stitches, but it's nice because maybe when you're stitching, you are doing the same stitches over and over again and you're not varying them up. You can't think or remember because it's been a long time since you stitched. And so you just don't remember all the stitches that you've learned. So it's kind of fun to have a sampler like this to remind yourself. And that's where I found this little sort of fly stitch that I decided to use. And if you don't have something like this or don't want to make something like this for yourself, that you would have kind of a reference of your different stitches, you can get something like this. And this is a DMC book that I picked up, I think, just at Walmart. I'll try to find a link and put it down in the description for you. But this was really handy. I bought it when I did that, the journal for Roxy's Journal of Stitchery. And it was really handy because it just, showed me some basics that I had forgotten. just even about the different threads and that kind of thing. But then it has just some really basic stitches in here and how to do them and just little tips. And so this is handy because if I'm kind of stumped on what I might want to do on my design, I can just look through here and find just different stitches, or maybe a different way to vary them up by the number that you do or how close together you put them or that sort of thing. So this was the fly stitch, and I've used it twice here, and they look different because of the type of thread that I used and just the style that I did it for where I was using it. So it's really handy to have some sort of reference if you need that. But that's what I did here. Again, was also the fly stitch. Again, I did it a little bit closer together, more of a triangular shape. And I liked this stitch for this because it's like a postage stamp, and it kind of gave me that postage stamp edge to my design. So when I'm, working on something, I may not have a plan for the whole thing. Like, I have no idea what this is going to end up looking like, but I look at one thing and think, okay, like the crown, I want to do that to look like a crown. And so finding just the different stitches or threads that I could use to make that look like a crown. And then that would lead to the next thing. So you kind of look at your patches that you're using. Like, this didn't really have any rhyme or reason to why I would do a cantha stitch. It just kind of felt right for there. These were a little easier because they actually depicted something. It was a stamp that I had stamped on fabric. So because this one was sort of that date cancellation stamp, I thought it would be fun to do those wavy lines that you see on a stamp. And to do that, I just grabbed another thread off of my table, one that I thought, was in my design. And then I wanted it to stand out. These all kind of blend in. And I was finding that everything, when I look at it, is kind of blending in, which so far that's fine. I'm just in my first layers. But it's kind of nice to have a lot of contrast. So I wanted you to also see what it's like if you use a similar color that doesn't stand out a lot versus something with a higher contrast. So I just did the wavy lines. I could have done 2 close together and then spaced in 2 and then spaced in 2, but I did 3 and then a bigger space and then 3. And would have been a good place to use my erasable pen. And I started to, but I thought, I want it to look messy. I'm just going to freehand it. So once I had one line, I could kind of follow the same pattern roughly to get that kind of wavy canceled stamp look. So that was fun. I like how that turned out. Sometimes I do take things very literally like that, but it just kind of moves me to the next spot, to the next thing. So I knew once I had done her crown that I also want to take her dress, especially on the spine, the actual spine. These sides are going to be wrapped around the book, so you won't see the whole picture of her. But I thought on the spine, it would be nice to see that it's a lady in a fancy dress kind of thing, and kind of use those elements as part of my design and take it very literally. And then maybe over here, I do some different things. So one thing I knew for sure is I wanted to do her jewelry with actual beads. Now, I know not everyone is going to have these beads, but I want to show you how I did this because I have a little kind of a hack, a little tip that I've shared in the past in a whole different context, but it worked out really well here. So I used seed beads, and that may be something that you have or have access to, can find easier, some different size seed beads. These are pretty tiny, but I remembered I had some super, super tiny beads in my jewelry stash. And I don't know if you can even tell compared to a seed bead. These are the small seed beads that I have. And these are even tinier. And these are actual gemstones. So this is, I think this one's labradorite. And I had some aquamarine. I have lots of different beads, but I thought it would be fun to actually make her jewelry with some semi-precious stones. So I'm going to show you how I do this. I know it's kind of hard to see in this light for one, but then also getting it to focus because they are so tiny. So I'm going to see if I can get in here and let it focus. But you can see that I've made her a little necklace. Now, I didn't finish it because I want to show you how I'm going to attach it. I don't want it being floppy and loose because I don't want it to get hung up on anything. So I want to show you how I got to this point and then what I'm going to do to kind of tack it all down. So I didn't have a needle small enough. This is the smallest needle that I had, which is pretty tiny, and it worked for my seed beads. They could go through with the thread, but I could get these little beads on the needle, but I couldn't get it through the eye, over the eye. I also tried these little flexible needles that I use for jewelry. This one kind of worked. Again, it was once I got even to this flexible eye, not all the beads it would go through. This does have a sharp enough point that I could poke it through my fabric, but it's, you know, it's flexible, so it's going to be harder to do. So the solution I came up with was one that I had used before. And what I did is you turn your thread into an actual needle. Now, I didn't do this enough times that I would actually poke this through my fabric, but I probably could make it sturdy enough that I could actually, you know, go through. But I didn't want to worry about that too much. I just really want to get it through the bead. So to do that, I just took a piece of my, a single strand of my embroidery floss. And again, I went ahead and grabbed one on my table. So I did use this kind of stagey color 647. And then I have what is called Bead Fix from Beadalon, and I'll try to find a link for that. I get this through a company where I get all my metals, but I'll see if I can find a link for you. But it's Bead Fix, and you could use super glue. It's the same kind. You just want to use the liquid one, not a gel. That takes longer to dry. This is instant. So I just put one little drop of this onto a piece of paper, you know, anything, just something that it'll sit on, and then just drag the end of your thread through the glue. And what that does is it turns the end. I know you're probably not going to be able to see this, but it hardened just the end of that, if you can see that. And so now I can fit that little thread through my bead without a needle on it. So what I did, I thought at first I did it and took the needle off, put it in, and stitched each bead on, but I didn't like how they laid. They were laying where I could see the hole up, and I want it where I see the side of the bead and I don't see all the holes because it just looks prettier. So I came up with my needle, regular needle on this through one side, and then I strung all the beads that I want on this first layer of her necklace. And then I threaded my needle back on to this. So I do have the needle here. Once I had the beads on, I put the needle on, and now I can use this. So I went back down through. So now it's just attached to each side of her neck. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to come up by that first bead. And then I'm going to go in between that first and second bead. And so my stitch that's going to hold it down is actually in between that first and second bead. I'm going to do a few so that you can see. Now I have to say that doing this, my new magnifying mirror came in very handy because these are super tiny. So I'm trying to do this without it now, but I love my magnifying mirror, or my magnifying light. I did put a link to it down in the description. And when I said I was going to do that, I thought they also had a tabletop version that had a stand. Mine actually is a clamp. So it clamps to the side of my jewelry bench. Otherwise, I would bring it over here and use it while I do this so you could see. But they didn't have a table version in that same brand. There are other brands, and they do have a tabletop version, but I was going to tell you what to look for if you want something like that. I like the clamp version, and it's very sturdy and is holding just fine. Even when I move my lamp into different positions, it holds it. And so I think if you spend more and get a really good quality one, that's going to be part of it. But the things I liked about it is those types of lamps that have an arm that moves. You know, there's like an arm that comes up and an arm that goes over. They have a spring in there that kind of holds everything where you want it. And this one is there's not plastic on it. It's like has a metal cover. So none of those springs show that we're going to collect dust or lint or anything. And so that is kind of nice. And then the magnifier is actually glass, not plastic. So that is also nice. And then there is a cover over that flips up so that your glass doesn't get dusty and dirty all the time. And then also the light has 4 different settings from very bright. And then you just keep clicking the on button and it changes to less light. So I'm just going around this whole thing in between each of these beads. And I'm probably, hopefully in the shot, but I'm maybe not doing it as straight as I would like because I am standing and I am not using my magnifying lamp. But I think you're going to get the idea. Okay, so I've gone in between each of these beads with a stitch. So now it's not floppy at all. Each bead is now sewn down. So I know that this is hard to get into focus, but you can see that she has a jeweled necklace now. So I may go and do the other strands. She's got 3 or 4 strands on this, so I may add to that too. I don't know if you can see that very well, but I really like how that it gets a little bit of sparkle. So that's where I am on this, and I think that is all I was going to show you. I'm going to keep kind of playing around and finish her jewelry. The other place that I really wanted to add beads, and I may still do that, is on these little crystal looking tassels on this chandelier, because I haven't decided about, if I'm going to do the chandelier in the background and then have a vine coming over to kind of cover this little dirty spot that I have, or if I'm just going to kind of skip it. I really kind of want to do that. So I want to make sure I do her and then it doesn't get too busy with things. Maybe I'll put a patch of fabric over this instead of the vine that I was talking about. And then that way I'm kind of covering up part of the chandelier and I can leave the rest of it looking like a chandelier. I don't know. I haven't decided. I think I do one thing at a time, and then one thing kind of leads to the other. So I know this was kind of a short video, but I just wanted you to see where I was, because I thought I was going to start working on the inside of this book too, and I do want to do that. So maybe in the next video, I'll show you where I'm at on this, and then we'll work on the insides of maybe that first book that I have the spine already on. So that's where I'm at today. Have a great rest of your day. Now go make something. Bye.